it's a good idea to aim to be fully awake in this incarnation. It's certainly possible. Yogananda had said to Roy Eugene Davis not to look to the left, not to look to the right, not to look behind oneself, but to look straight ahead to the goal and to go all the way. And he told Mr. Davis, "You can." And he didn't mean that simply for Mr. Davis. He meant that for all people. And that's the reason that Mr. Davis told that story over and over again. So that you and I and everyone else who's practicing Kriya Yoga can recognize their capacity to wake up in this incarnation. Now, once you're clear on the fact that you can wake up in this incarnation, you hold that truth inside of you, in your heart. And when you're holding that truth inside of you, in your heart, what you will find is that you will tend to be nudged in your life into circumstances and situations which will allow that to be true, which will allow that to come forth. Now, don't mistake when I'm saying that you will be nudged into situations that lead to happiness all the time. Because we have various kinds of attachments and things that we have to work through. And sometimes difficult experiences are required to help us work through those things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There is that axiom or that idea that people say, God doesn't give you things that you can't handle. Now, I'll admit I found that to be pretty annoying, especially when going through very difficult circumstances. But what I have found is that even when going through difficult circumstances, while continuing to meditate every day, continuing to study the sutras, continuing to maintain a sense of faith and devotion to the wholeness of life, that after a circumstance passed, the amount of strength that was given by doing my best to be responsible in that circumstance, to be surrendered in that circumstance, to again do my best, but to give the results and the experiences up to this greater wholeness of life, that increased what it seems like my capacity for self-realization. And others have found that to be true as well. So you don't want to be afraid of life and the difficulties that life can bring. That is part of your self-realization process too. You also don't necessarily want to throw away perceived blessings or grace that you have within your life. It's perfectly good to appreciate those things and to spend time looking at those things, holding those things in your awareness, all the while recognizing that this is your individualized expression of a divine life, with all of its blessings, with all of its difficulties. And that as long as you continue to meditate every day to deepen your capacity to experience clarity after meditation techniques, while being responsible, being receptive, being responsive to life and what life brings, recognizing that every experience that life brings is an opportunity to release yourself from some form of karma. Maybe many of you remember a long time ago, I mentioned that I particularly enjoyed saying when difficult things happened, well, I'm glad that karma's over. It's partially what we're doing, exhausting our karmas. But it is okay to live the life that you have, recognizing that that life you have is your spiritual path. And that the meditation process is a training device that allows you to access, experience that timeless essence of your nature, which persists before and after the body, before you even knew this personality that you think you are. It gives you the capacity to honor and acknowledge that while simultaneously participating, playing your role in this life. And if we can learn to ride that seeming dichotomy, it's not a dichotomy, it's not even a duality. It seems that way because we're so used to being caught up in body consciousness and mind consciousness. But if we can learn to ride that dichotomy, that seeming duality, what we will find is sometime while we are alive and embodied, we recognize that we are awake. Pure, serene, aware, clear, perfectly awake. If that's not the case, and we've done our very best, then when it's time for the body to pass and it's time to transition into a different state of awareness, a different state of being, we recognize, wow, I am awake. I was playing this little role. And for most people, that's the way it goes. In fact, for everyone, that's eventually the way it goes. But it is possible to be awake in this life, one way or the other. You can be awake right now, or once the body passes and you're no longer bound by the physical form and your mind and your personality, you recognize you were awake the whole time anyway. The purpose of our yoga practice is to access that clarity and that awareness and that what we consider awake state of consciousness while we are embodied. And to really get a hold of this is one of the reasons why we spent so much time contemplating the Bhagavad Gita in year 1 of the Kriya Yoga apprenticeship course. Because it is in the Bhagavad Gita that it is described how to play your role while realizing the Supreme. And throughout that text, over and over again, there's this reference to letting go of attachments. Letting go of attachments to the positive, letting go of attachments to the negative, existing in what is, without coloration of the mind or objectification. That is not an easy thing while we are identified with a body, but that is what we're doing in meditation, is recognizing we are not simply a body or a personality. Roy Eugene Davis has talked about it, Yogananda has talked about it, Sri Yukteswar has talked about it, Lahiri Messiah has talked about it. It's this mistaken sense of self-identity that causes all the problem. So that is why in the Bhagavad Gita there is this profound emphasis on doing one's work, but letting go of the fruits of attachment to that work. That true renunciation isn't not doing anything. It's doing what arises as an inspiration. And then letting go of attachment. If you can get your mind around that, you will find that you can get your mind around how to meditate very well. And then you will be able to get your mind around the capacity of being fully awake in this current incarnation, in this current life. And that is one of the things we're doing here in this Kriya Yoga process. So contemplate this. Spend some time considering it. And then recognize, admit, hold that truth in your heart, that it is very possible for you to be awake in this incarnation, either while embodied, right now, right here. Of course, it requires the hard work of figuring out what non-attachment renunciation actually means, or trusting in the process of life, not being addicted to sense experience. And then when it's time to let the body go at death, or when we're done here in this realm, you'll recognize it to be true then.